I want to thank you, Katie, and thank you to the Sorensen folks, and thank you to SOCAP. Impact Alpha traces its own origin story to SOCAP, so it's a little bit heady to be here on the stage with all of you, but here we are. So, Cecilia, it's been such a pleasure getting to know you.
Same here.
We're going to get to Levers for Change in a moment, but for 10 years, you were charged with making the cold calls to the MacArthur geniuses and telling them by surprise that they had just won something like $850,000. What was that like?
It's one of the coolest jobs in the world. You know, I had come to that job from being a college dean where a lot of my work was saying no. And here, people, you don't have to say no, you're just calling them up and giving them this news. And it was always fun because some people would answer the phone, and I remember one particular fellow answered the phone and was angry because he was having issue with the cable company, and he thought we were the cable company. And so we had this grumpy noise, and so we always begin with, excuse me, I'm Cecilia Conrad. Are you someplace where you can have a confidential conversation? Which sounds suspicious, and so you get a little awkwardness there. And it's just, and then the moment when you tell them, we've had tears, we've had these funny stories of revelation of, oh my, I have some money that I didn't have before. We had someone who was in a cab, and he was going out to dinner with his girlfriend, and he stopped the cab and he said, wait a moment, we're gonna go to a more expensive restaurant. So it's amazing.
But it's interesting because Levers for Change is actually a different model. So there, nobody knew they were getting anything, and in Levers for Change, folks have been working hard and applying, and so
very different models. What they have in common, though, is the notion that there is creativity out there that needs to be discovered and enabled, and they share that commitment. The Fellows Program is well known for its secrecy. We rely on nominations. What people probably don't know, though, is the reach of those nominations. Each month, we invite about 200 new people to nominate. So we're relying quite a bit on the expertise that isn't inside of the foundation, but outside the foundation to guide that selection process. What we found in that case is that if you want people to really take some risk in their nominations, it helps to have the kind of veil of secrecy around it. In Lever for Change, instead, again, we're open. We're trying to encourage ideas from outside of the foundation, from outside of whatever the individual funder's staffing looks like. We're also relying on expertise. Outside expertise, we put together these panels of evaluators. Perhaps some of you have been on panels to read those proposals and give feedback. But again, the goal is to convey agency and resources to those people who have some great ideas about how to solve the problems so that they can get to work and solve them.
So it started with 100 and change from MacArthur Foundation, and that did not have a specific.
Yes, that was as open as you could get.
That was as open as you could get. So you were just looking for good ideas to solve a big problem with $100 million.
That's correct. $100 million, any problem, anywhere. We were open to for-profits and nonprofits anywhere in the globe.
And the first winner of that was very interesting.
Collaboration, yes, between Sesame Workshop, was in Big Bird, and the International Rescue Committee. And one could say, okay, these are two big, well-known organizations. Really, did you have to do a big open call to get that? But the idea that they came forward with, that there needed to be an intervention to help the youngest victims of displacement, refugee crises that was particularly happening. Their initial focus was the Syrian refugee region. Because once somebody's been displaced, they're probably going to be displaced for 20-some years. So that means that those young children are going to be in a new environment. They've suffered an incredible trauma, and we wanted to set them on a path that gave them the best chance of success in that new environment. So it was a really interesting idea and a collaboration between two organizations that hadn't worked together before. The result is there's a television show now called Ahilan Simpson, Welcome Sesame. It's got specially created Muppets that were developed in the local communities. And then there was a program of supporting parents, both inside of refugee camps and who had already moved into urban areas, with help to help them support their youngest children. First sets of evaluations of the program are really strong. There are lots of indicators that it's working.
And so now, though, it's spun out of MacArthur, and each contest, I don't know if you call it a contest, but each has its own sectoral focus. So are you kind of the X Prize of social causes?
Not quite. I mean, we have some similarities, but in the sense that I think both of us are trying to really solve big problems. X Prize is designed to reward organizations who hit certain targets. It's usually very technology driven, and it sort of gives you the prize once you've done the thing. Lever for Change is addressing a different set of problems that don't necessarily lend themselves to predefined metrics. In fact, one of our core principles is that applicants tell us what metrics they should be assessed by. How are they going to solve the problem? And then we fund the work to get to that solution.
I was kind of interested in the journey from the Genius grants to the Levers for Change, because Mackenzie Scott also, I think, people would get a call, or they might have had a little hint that Bridgespan had nosed around a little bit, but the call would come and they would get the prize without having applied for it. But now they've changed, and you have a gig with Mackenzie Scott.
We were able last year to help the Scott and the Yield Giving team to offer another approach to their grant making. Before, they did quiet research and they would do due diligence. Like you said, it seems a little bit like the Fellows Program, but they wanted to create a pathway for organizations to apply, to make sure they were particularly interested in smaller organizations. So we ran the Yield Giving Open Call, which was for organizations with budgets between 1 and 5 million, so small-ish, not the smallest, but small-ish. And one of the things that was really exciting about it is their initial commitment was that they were going to give out $251 million awards. The pool was so rich and wonderful that in the end, they gave out $640 million total to 361 organizations. And they were and this is the other part, most of those organizations got 2 million instead of 1.
So I hope you don't take this the wrong way, but in my newspaper career, one of my beats was philanthropy, and I think the takeaway from several years of covering that was philanthropy is broken. And I got very exercised about the 5% payout rule, which many folks will know. I was like, you can't be serious, 5%. So this is, you're part of a kind of reimagining or renewing of philanthropy, I think.
We are. Part of the motivation for creating Lever for Change was that we could observe that there was kind of a market failure happening. We had, on the one hand, we've had this incredible growth in wealth, right? And happily, some of the people who've gotten extremely wealthy want to share those riches. They want to do good things. But when you talk to them, they say, it's so overwhelming. I don't have time because I'm still earning my wealth. There's an information problem between the two. And on the other hand, there are all these organizations who have great ideas and could do a lot, but they don't have the philanthropic capital. So we were set up in a way to try and help address that. We wanted to work with individual funders, and we have. We've also worked, though, with big institutions like Kellogg and Lego and so on, some of whom I think are in the room, to help to fill that, to solve that information asymmetry through this open call process and through a rigorous process that mobilizes expertise that's beyond what any individual donor will have on their staff, or even a foundation will necessarily have on their staff.
One of the things that comes up, and it's not just, frankly, in philanthropy, it's actually in the fundraising world, any folks who have been trying to raise money, is there's many more no's than there are yeses. And so you have a rigorous process, and the winner is off to the races. And meanwhile, hundreds, if not thousands, of applicants have spent many, many hours, and they go home without the prize.
And so there's a tension here, and the tension is between the desire to be open And when you're open, it means that you're trying to bring organizations who are not well known in the philanthropic community. The program officer doesn't know, the foundation doesn't know. So you need to provide enough information to persuade the funding to go out. And we recognize that early on. That means there's a burden, there's an application process. We've tried to build the application and create it so that it creates value add even for the organizations. We've had organizations say that doing the application kind of helped them solidify what would we do if we really had enough funding. We also provide feedback to every one of the organizations that applies. But then those that end up near the top in our challenges we have a commitment to. They become part of our Bold Solutions Network, and you can go on our website and you can peruse some of those great projects and proposals. We support those organizations with opportunities for learning, we try to uplift them and get them in front of funders in different communities. We've had a panel this morning with some of our Bold Solutions Network members. And the goal is to bring in additional funding. And one of the things I'm incredibly proud of about what we've done is that we mentioned the $2.2 billion in the introduction. Almost half of that is not from the donor who sponsored a competition. It's from the other donors who've supported other organizations that we identified through that process.
So does it work? I think the second winner the next year in 100 for Change was Community Solutions, looking for solutions to homelessness. Homelessness still exists. All in on big, bold solutions and enough money, but what are you finding
Well, what we're
terms of
finding
results?
across the challenges, I mean, some of these awards are still fairly new. So let's take Community Solutions for an example. This is a project that works with cities, counties, local government entities to create a data infrastructure. It's called the by name data infrastructure that has been proven to work in some cities to help reduce chronic homelessness. So there's still homelessness, but it's shorter duration and less likely to have recidivism in that space. And it has shown progress. The Detroit announced a year ago a big reduction in their veteran homeless population. It is not a fast solution. Solutions rarely are, and that's one of the great things about the challenges we run is that donors make multi-year significant commitments, and they also recognize that you need patience and to give organizations the opportunity to pivot.
Yeah. I think you just opened up the Global Women's Health Challenge with something like $250 million at stake from Melinda Gates?
Yes, one of Melinda French Gates' commitments in terms of her work on empowering women is going to be an open call. We announced it a couple of weeks ago, so you can go to the website, the Action for Women's Health Open Call.
And
yes.
you told me that you haven't gotten too many because they all come in right at the...
Yeah, applications always come at the end, but you have to register first. So if you're interested, you need to go and take a look.
All right, so $250 million out there for global women's health. And then another one that's coming up that's interesting is I think Reid Hoffman put up some money, may have not escaped your attention. There's an election coming up, I think, for restoring trust in democracy.
Yes, and this is restoring trust in institutions of democratic society. We're going to launch that sometime after the election.
And what do you and what kinds of things do you think might emerge?
You know, it's what's exciting about this is that they are being very open about how you identify what are the critical institutions. I'm expecting we'll have some things around the news media. I suspect we'll have some things around government, both local, state, and federal. There may be some proposals that have to do restoring trust in higher education, in science. I think there's so many features. I mean, what we've seen in studies recently is there's even a decline in trust in nonprofits.
Yeah. Cecilia, if you want to see her glammed up with makeup, you pick up the new issue of Town and Country, the philanthropy issue, and she's got a whole photo spread there. But just how do you...
You have the white hair and the glasses, but you won't recognize the rest of me.
How do you keep, I've just been struck, how do you keep your energy up?
So I've always been kind of an upbeat person, and I realize it's because I've had a charmed life. And some of it has to do with just when I was born. I was born in 1955, so you can do the math, big birthday coming up, right after Brown versus Board of Education. So there were educational opportunities that wouldn't have existed for people before me. And I timed it just right that I kind of got to college and came on the labor market really at the peak of the enforcement of the Equal Employment Opportunity laws. In fact, my graduate school education was the result of a big settlement between the EEOC and AT&T. They paid for my graduate education. And so every moment I had these doors that were open that had been closed in the past. And one of the things that I was raised by my parents and the community I was in is that conveys a certain responsibility to keep those doors open, keep pushing them open where they're closed, and that keeps me energized, particularly at this moment in time where there's an effort to close them again. So I got to keep going because I got to keep those doors open.
So keep those doors open.